everyone, everywhere. This is the voice of freedom, broadcasting from somewhere in the Philippines. Bataan has fallen. The Philippine-American troops on this war-ravaged and blood-stained peninsula have laid down their arms. With heads bloody but unbowed, they have yielded to the superior force and numbers of the enemy. The adversary, in the pride of his power and triumph, will credit our troops with nothing less than the courage and fortitude that his own troops have shown in battle. Our men have fought a brave and bitterly contested struggle. All the world will testify to the almost superhuman endurance with which they stood up until the last in the face of overwhelming odds. But the decision had to come. Men fighting under the banner of unshakable faith are made of something more than flesh, but they are not made of impervious steel. The flesh must yield at last. Endurance melts away, and the end of the battle must come. Bataan has fallen, but the spirit that made it stand, a beacon to all the liberty-loving peoples of the world, cannot fail.
Araw ng Kagitingan, a tribute to courage and sacrifice. On April 9th, a national observance known as Araw ng Kagitingan, Day of Valor, takes place in the Philippines, but its history is a solemn remembrance rooted in one of the darkest yet most heroic chapters of World War II. The holiday's significance comes from the memory of immense sacrifice by Filipino and American soldiers against overwhelming odds, transforming a military defeat into an enduring symbol of national resilience. It is not in its origins a celebration of victory, but a tribute to an unyielding endurance even in defeat. The Fall of Bataan, the Stand and Surrender 1941-1942. The primary focus of Araw ng Kagitingan is the heroic defense and subsequent fall of Bataan Peninsula during the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. The Gallant Stand. When the Japanese Imperial Army invaded the Philippines in December 1941, General Douglas MacArthur initially rejected pre-war strategies, wanting instead to fight the enemy on the beaches. However, his initial defense were quickly overwhelmed, and he was forced on December 23rd to revert to the War Plan Orange No. 3. This plan ordered all combined Philippine and American forces to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula. The core strategy of War Plan Orange 3 was to delay the enemy and hold Manila Bay by fortifying Bataan until the U.S. Pacific Fleet could arrive with massive reinforcements. The reality, however, was that after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Pacific Fleet was in ruins. The United States had shifted its focus to a Europe-first strategy. The troops in Bataan were essentially waiting for ships that were never going to sail. Yet for over 3 months, these defenders held the line despite dwindling food, rampant disease, and crushing realization that reinforcements were not coming. They put up a fierce resistance that significantly delayed Japan's conquest of the Pacific. The Europe First secret. They had absolutely zero knowledge of the Europe First or Germany First strategy. That was a highly classified agreement made between Franklin D. Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. To the soldiers in the trenches, the Philippines was the center of the war. They could not have fathomed that they had already been quietly written off as a secondary priority.
The broadcasts of false hope. What makes their situation even more heartbreaking is that they were actively being told to wait. The Voice of Freedom radio broadcasts from Malinta Tunnel in Corregidor continuously broadcasted messages of hope, assuring the starving troops that thousands of reinforcements and hundreds of planes were on the way.
The retreat to Corregidor. Just before Christmas in 1941, as Manila was heavily bombed, General MacArthur ordered Quezon, his family, and key cabinet members, including Vice President Sergio Osmeña, to evacuate to Corregidor Island. They set up the Commonwealth government inside the damp, crowded Malinta Tunnel. The illness. Quezon was already suffering severely from tuberculosis. The terrible air quality inside the tunnel made his condition rapidly deteriorate. He was coughing up blood and confined to a wheelchair, yet he was still trying to manage a collapsing nation via radio broadcast. The escape. By February 1942, it became clear that the Philippines would fall. President Franklin D. Roosevelt directly ordered MacArthur and Quezon to evacuate so that they wouldn't be captured and used as propaganda by the Japanese. The submarine. In the dead of night on February 20, 1942, weeks before Bataan surrendered, Quezon and his family were smuggled off Corregidor in a U.S. submarine, the USS Swordfish. They made a dangerous journey to the Visayas, then to Australia, and eventually to Washington, D.C., where Quezon established a government in exile. The tragic end. Quezon was not informed of the Europe First strategy. He spent the rest of his life in the U.S. lobbying for liberation of the Philippines, but his tuberculosis finally claimed his life in August 1944. In New York, he died just 2 months before MacArthur returned to Leyte. He never lived to see his country freed. The illusion of the Pacific Fleet. The soldiers knew Pearl Harbor had been attacked. The invasion of the Philippines happened just hours later. However, the U.S. military strictly censored the extent of the devastation to prevent a total collapse in morale. The men in Bataan believed the fleet was damaged, not paralyzed. There were constant desperate rumors on the front lines that a miles-long American convoy was already halfway across the Pacific to save them. The inevitable surrender on April 9, 1942, the situation became completely untenable. Without direct authorization from his superiors, Major General Edward P. King, Jr., commander of the Luzon Force, made an agonizing decision to surrender to prevent the complete annihilation of his remaining troops. But before raising the white flag, the defenders ensured the Japanese would gain no tactical advantage from their defeat. Orders were given and the soldiers systematically destroyed all the remaining weapons, ammunition, and equipment, so they could not be used by the enemy. Only then did King surrender over 76,000 starving and disease-ridden men, approximately 64,000 Filipinos, and 12,000 Americans. The aftermath. The Bataan Death March, April 1942. The surrender of Bataan did not bring relief to the prisoners of war. Instead, it marked the beginning of an infamous tragedy that shocked the world. The harrowing journey. The captured soldiers were disarmed and forced to endure a brutal 140-kilometer, roughly 87-mile trek from Maribeles, Bataan to San Fernando, Pampanga, and eventually by rail freight car to Camp O'Donnell in Capas, Tarlac. This became known as the Bataan Death March. Unimaginable cruelty. During the march, prisoners were subjected to extreme physical abuse, starvation, dehydration under the scorching sun, and wanton executions. Those who fell behind or collapsed from exhaustion were often beaten or killed by their captors. The toll. While precise numbers are difficult to verify because many escaped into the jungles, thousands of prisoners, predominantly Filipinos, died along the way from heat prostration, untreated wounds, disease, and murder. Only an estimated 54,000 men reached the prison camp, where thousands more would perish in captivity. captivity. National Observance and Evolution 1961 present. Decades after the war, the Philippine government formalized the remembrance of these events to ensure the heroism of the defenders would never be forgotten. Bataan Day. In April 1961, President Carlos P. Garcia signed the Republic Act No. 3022, legally declaring April 9 of every year as Bataan Day, a national holiday to honor the fallen. The Mount Samat National Shrine, also known as Dambana ng Kagitingan, was commissioned under the administration of former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Construction started. The cornerstone was laid on April 14, 1966 as part of the commemoration of the 24th anniversary of Bataan Day. Purpose: it was built to honor the heroism and sacrifice of the Filipino and American soldiers who fought during World War II. Architect and artist. Architect Lorenzo del Castillo. Sculptor. National artist Napoleon Abueva, who created the high relief sculptures on the exteriors of the cross and within the colonnade. Completion: it was fully completed and inaugurated in 1970, exactly 25 years after the end of the Second World War. Renaming to Day of Valor. In 1987, President Corazon C. Aquino issued Executive Order No. 203, which revised the country's national holidays and officially designated April 9 as Araw ng Kagitingan, Bataan and Corregidor Day. This shift in name emphasizes the valor, Kagitingan of the soldiers rather than the geographic location of the defeat. Modern commemoration. Today, the focal point of the annual observance is the Mount Samat National Shrine, Dambana ng Kagitingan in Pilar, Bataan. The Philippine President typically leads ceremonies there, alongside surviving veterans and ambassadors from the United States and Japan.
Today, Araw ng Kagitingan stands as a stark reminder of the cost of freedom. Rather than dwelling solely on the sorrow of defeat, Filipinos observe the day to draw inspiration from the extraordinary resilience and sacrifice of those who fought to defend their motherland.
In history, 76,000 Filipino and American soldiers are often counted as a number, yet each one was a life, a name, a family, and a future that once held hope.